In this video, we'll see some examples of how to use controls to change the inputs in a model. If you don't have the Developer tab, go to File, Options, Customize Ribbon, and check Developer tab right here. Then go to the Developer tab and choose Insert, and we will use Form Controls. We will never use ActiveX controls. We'll always use Form Controls. And let's start with something simple like a checkbox. And I've added type to this because it's kind of a yes or no option that lends itself well to a checkbox. And we'll say beginning of period. And if we don't check that box, then we can assume it's going to happen at the end of the period. And if we need to move that, we can right click on it, right click, grab the outside, move it up a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and color some cells gray here so that these controls will show up a little bit better. And each control is going to have a linked cell. And so this control, if I right click, format control, choose cell link, I'll choose that I7 as the linked cell. I like to 3D shade these. And now when we click on this control, it will change I7 either to true or false. So we need to come over here and say if this box is checked, in other words, if that is true, then use a 1, otherwise use a 0. And now when we check that box, we'll put a 1 here and change our payment amount. And that's all there is to a checkbox. If we would like to be able to change the term, let's say, with a spin control, let's go to Developer, Insert, and choose the fourth one over, which is a spin button control. I'm going to draw a tiny little spin button here, just about as tall as a cell. Make it a little bit taller. And then right click on it, format control. It will also have a cell link. And we'll put it over here. And we probably want the minimum value for term to be about 1 year. And we want the maximum to be about 30 years. Let's make the current value 15. It will change as soon as we click the control and say OK. Now when we click this control, it changes cell I5. So we can simply link this cell by saying equals I5. And now when we change the spinner, it will change the term, and it will also change the payment amount. Notice that these are no longer inputs, so I'm going to go back and format it as normal. Otherwise I might be tempted to type an answer in there. Type an input in there rather. So as we assign controls to the inputs, we should format them as something besides an input. Now let's try interest rate. Let's try to do a control on interest rate. If we try to do that spin button, format control, I'm going to come over here and link it, and notice that the minimum value can go down to 0. The maximum can go up to 30,000, but the incremental change can only be a 1 or a 0 or a 2. It has to be a whole number. And so if I make it as small as possible, not being a 0, then when I start using the spin button, notice that my linked cell counts as a whole number. So if I'm trying to get to 6%, the lowest I can get is 1 before it goes to 0. So the trick we talked about in class was, let's take this cell and say equals the linked cell divided by 100. And now we can change that cell by whole numbers of percent, formatted as normal. In fact, I'm going to format it as a percent. And so now when we change this to a 5, this gets changed to a 5%, and so on. And finally, let's try the loan amount. Let's put a scroll bar on that one. This is on the second row, called a scroll bar, and they can be vertical or horizontal depending on how you draw them. We'll put one right here, right click on it, and link it to I4. Again, we have this problem of minimum can go to 0, but the maximum that Excel will allow in here is about 30,000. We need loan amounts larger than 30,000. So I'll say 1,000, current value of 100. Let's try this out. If I now set this cell equal to this cell times 1,000, then every time we change this, it changes that. It also changes our payment amount. However, this could be really hard to run this thing up to 250,000 at this rate. So let's right click on it, format it, and give it a page change of more like 100. And let's give it an incremental change of 10, and a current value of 110. You can just play around with these numbers until you get it to work the way you want. But now when I click on the page change, it raises it by 100,000 at a time. And if I click on the little arrow on the end, it changes it by 10,000 at a time. And that's a quick overview of controls.